Howdy, kids. I have been watching a little video about Matthew 19:9 recently with Christine Bacon and John Clark, and then a little David Nix, Father David Nix, and Lila Miller and Peter Kreeft. And I'm thinking, I have got to get this together and really try to comb it out, make it clear that you cannot invalid marriage doesn't justify your divorce. You cannot, quote, put away or divorce your spouse based on your suspicion of invalidity. And there's some eyebrow raising stuff that's been said on YouTube about this. So I'm going to go through this and try not to rush it or, cram so many words in there that it just becomes a big it makes your head spin. It gets too crazy. Father Dave Nix, by the way, did a really good video on this, which is why it got me going a year or two ago. He messes it up at the end, I think, but he says so much. It's like drinking through a fire hose, and it becomes, I think, ineffective. The amount of views he has on his video is not that long, not that many. And I'm going, I want to try to pick this up because it's amazing. It comes from Cornelius Elapide, Father Cornelius Elapide. He was um, and an exegete, a biblical exegete in the 1600s. He's the man, basically. All right, so let's check this out. Here we go. Let me get this over here. Share this tab. Okay, hang on a sec. Look at this. Matthew 19:9. This is the verse that brings it all together because all these Jews were divorcing their spouse, so putting their wives away so they could go get a new wife and stuff. By the way, yeah, so here, I say to you, whosoever shall put away his wife, that means divorce from bed and board. That's what put away means. Divorce from bed and board. That doesn't mean divorce like break the bond, which is unbreakable. It means separate, put away, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. Okay, so what? We'll get into this, but this is the key point or the key Bible verse we're dissecting here. And what it means is if whoever shall, if you put away, you can only put away a guilty spouse for fornication, means she commits adultery or she makes life unduly difficult, then you can put her away physically, but as we'll find out later in the video, only by bishop's permission. All right, let's get rid of this screen here. See what we can figure out. Let's go to our next video, and we're going to listen to Peter Kreeft for just a second. Here.
Divorce, for instance.
He talks quiet.
Divorce is suicide, the suicide of the one flesh created by marriage. Marriage is not just a job description or a contract. Marriage is a reality.
It is a contract. In fact, the marriage is the contract itself. That is a quote from Leo the 13th and also from the church. That contract is the marriage. You can't separate them. It's like separating the body from the soul. You can't take the contract away.
That is why the Catholic Church is the only institution in the world that upholds the truth about marriage. That divorce is a superstition. Divorce does not exist.
It does exist. You have to define what you mean by divorce, but hang on.
Divorce is a lie. If that is a valid marriage, it's forever.
Right there. If that's a valid marriage, it's forever. Okay, that's another way of saying, hang on, we could fix this screen. If that's a valid marriage, it's forever. That's, oh, wait, I just messed up what I was saying. What did he say? Oh, if it's a valid marriage. Okay, therefore, everyone says, I don't think I have a valid marriage, therefore my marriage isn't forever, as in till death. So all this stuff about marriage permanence just flies out the window because everyone has an escape clause, and that is, if I don't think my marriage is valid, I can just bail, because Matthew 19:9, and everyone says, if you think the marriage is invalid, porneia, aka fornication, if you think it's invalid, you're done. You're off the hook. So all this stuff about marriage permanence, divorce, blah, 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 it doesn't matter if you can just declare yourself invalid in your mind and then follow through with it and get the annulment. Hang on, let's see what else he says.
It cannot be dissolved any more than the Trinity can be dissolved, any more than your soul can be dissolved into two souls. Your body can be cut in half. Your soul can't be cut in half.
Okay, yeah. So he goes on and on. So that was the main point with Peter Kreeft. Just all this talk about marriage permanence is meaningless if you can just get an annulment and a no-fault divorce and a no-sin divorce with the sacraments. Marriage means nothing. It is lawless and without definition. Turn the heater back on. I'm going back and forth the heat. I got some sun today. It's sort of spring, but it's sort of not. Okay, let's check out our next little video here, shall we? Here we go. Now, this is Christine Bacon, the breakfast and bacon lady. I argue with her on YouTube. She doesn't argue back too much, so. And John Clark, who won't talk to me at all. And he's going to explain this Matthew 19:9 exception clause, and they're going to get it totally wrong. Listen to this.
Is there an adultery clause?
No, because the porneia would refer to a marriage which.
Oh, what the heck is going on here? Hang on, I'm going to push pause. Okay, I think I fixed it. Let's try this again. Hang on. She's going to ask if there's an adultery clause, meaning, can I get out of my marriage if the spouse commits adultery? Here, listen.
Is there an adultery clause?
No, because the porneia would refer to a marriage which was never valid because of an ancestral relationship.
Wrong. No, sorry, that's not it. The porneia, that word, is also fornication. And all that means is if your spouse acts against the marriage, you can separate. That's all this means. So the Protestants, when God invented Protestants, I don't know how many years ago that was exactly, 500 years ago, they started going, oh, yeah, this exception clause means if they commit adultery, I can bail. That's wrong. But the Catholics have always understood until the Beatles that you can put your spouse away if they are a guilty spouse. That's why we have separation courts. Okay. You got to prove it. Now let's just, so that's why this whole mindset of theirs exists. It's all because we have to justify the annulment. So now people are saying, oh, if I feel my marriage is invalid, let's check out some other, let me see what else we got here. By the way, let's share this tab. I'm going to go a little bit bigger on it so we can see it. Hang on. Okay. So anyone who thinks that they can separate on their own authority based on the fact that they think their marriage is invalid, here's what the church has ruled. If there is a question of alleged nullity of the marriage, private authority is not recognized as an adequate basis for establishing a legitimate separation. This just proves right there that Matthew 19:9 does not mean if you think your marriage is invalid, you can put your spouse away physically. Okay. In addition, the separation of spouses is not merely a civil effect of marriage. No, duh. It's about natural law. That's what that is. All right. So there's that. We'll come back to that in a minute. Now, what else we got? I'm going to, hopefully I don't go too long in this. I'm going to plow through a little bit of Cornelius a Lapide. He is, as I said, he's a Jesuit from the 1600s. I think he died. I don't know if anyone thinks the guy is wrong. He's just the man. He's the one who goes through all the scripture. So he says Matthew 19:9, and this is thanks to Father Dave Nix who pointed this out for us. Matthew 19:9 says, if you put your spouse away, if you put away an innocent spouse, you're guilty of adultery. Period. That's it. And if you marry a spouse that's put away, you're guilty of adultery. So it's two things. All right, let's see what we got here. Let me go down. Let me scroll down a little bit. We're gonna read through this. And like I said, when I listened to Father Dave Nix, it was drinking through a fire hose. He said so much stuff. I don't know if his point landed because it was just too much. All right. There is a twofold reason by which Christ proves that a man ought not to put away his wife. Number one, a man putting away his wife is contrary to nature. That means separating. That means moving out is contrary to nature. This is why divorce is a grave offense against natural law, 2384. The putting away just like abortion rips the arms and legs off a baby is against nature, when you put away your spouse, you're ripping one flesh apart physically with, you know what I'm saying? Okay. Now, so a man's putting away his wife is contrary to nature, just as it is contrary to nature that one flesh. Okay. 2, the divorce is contrary to the ordinance of God. So, and I'll get to it further later in this talk about Layla Miller, how she keeps saying, don't let me get there. I'll get there in a minute. So, at any rate, that part is interesting. Let's go down here a little bit. So, all these people, like Father Nix was saying, all these Jews were putting away their wives because they were going to kill them if they didn't put them away. So that's why Moses allowed that. But he's saying Moses suffered you to put away your wives when you hated them. Lest you would not divorce them, you should kill them. So he kind of allowed the divorce. That's why they allowed the divorce. Otherwise, they would just off the spouse. And so he's like, whoa, we can't do that. Because that was before the time of grace. So, for so great was the hardness and the carnality of your hearts, you would rather put them to death without the pleasure of a new. Okay. By the way, you keep hearing about God hates divorce. Up, down, sideways, everyone says that. That's not what the Bible says. One thing that John Clark does say that's good is he says you got to go to the Douay Reams. Totally, bro. If you want to get straight on this stuff, find out what it really says. Go to the Douay Reams. So Malachi 2:16 does not say God hates divorce. It says, when thou shalt hate her, put her away. Okay, and that's exactly what it says elsewhere in the Bible. When you hated them, you put away your wives. When you hated them, that's what God hates divorce really means. Is when you hate your spouse, you put them away. All right, let's see what else we got here on this. My notes here from Cornelius a Lapide. And I declare that whosoever shall put away his wife and shall marry another shall be accounted and shall be in fact an adulterer, except for fornication. What does except for fornication mean? That is, except on account of adultery. So, for what in those who are free is fornication is marriage. Okay. And this dissolves marriage uh quad thorum, that means bed and board, though not vinculum, that means the bond. For the adulterer does not keep the faith which he gave to his spouse, hence whence he may be put away by his spouse, according to the saying, with him who has broken troth or trust, let troth be broken. So if your spouse breaks trust, as in adultery, then you are permitted to physically put them away. That's how that works. But I got more to say about that. Hold on. Don't run with that. All right, let's go down. Observe how plainly Christ opposes his own word to the sanction which Moses had given the bill of divorce, and how he condemns whosoever makes use of it as guilty of adultery. So any of this putting away stuff, you're guilty of adultery unless you have a guilty spouse. And this is why we have the church, so that the church can prove guilt and innocence. Protestants can't do jack with this verse because they don't have a church, they don't have a judicial system, they don't have due process, they don't have bishops. They got nothing. They got the Bible, so they got to make up their own thing, which is why this whole divorce or separate on your own authority is totally Protestant. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Hang on. All right. So who shall put away his wife unless, this is all Cornelius a Lapide kind of editorializing so us knuckleheads can figure it out. Whoso shall put away his wife unless for fornication and marries another commits adultery. He commits adultery, I say, by putting away his wife. Okay, so there, look, you commit adultery by putting away your wife. Unless for fornication. Wait, did I get that right? I hope I didn't. Hang on a second. I accidentally retyped some stuff by accident. Okay, so who shall put away his wife except for fornication and marries another commits adultery? He commits adultery both by putting away his wife. So just putting away your wife is adultery. He commits so adultery is anything against the marriage contract. Okay, it's not just the classic committing adultery, going off with someone else's spouse. It is, or violating your own marriage vows. It's anything that, like, breaking up the bed and board. That is, he is twice the adulterer. Okay, Christ gives the answer to both questions he put to him. The Pharisees had asked two. Matthew 19 is not one question, it's two questions. Just for kicks, let's go back to Matthew 19, see what it says. I say to you that whoever shall put away his wife except for fornication, that's one question right there, because they said, who can divorce? You know what? I'm repeating myself. We're going to go back to where we were because it comes through this. Hang on. Okay. All right. Back from the bio break. Okay. So yeah, the Pharisees asked him two questions. Okay. Here. Okay. So by way of analogy, to help us understand it a little bit better, here, let me fix this. Hang on a second. He says it is the same form of expression as if to say, he who breaks his fast without a dispensation and gets drunk commits sin. So there's two things wrong there. Can you break the fast, and can you get drunk? Those are two questions. Just like, can you put away and can you marry another? Okay, two questions in Matthew 19:9, not just one. Therefore, so adultery answers both. So therefore, he who does not fast, having a dispensation, does not sin by eating, but sins by getting drunk. If you don't get the dispensation, you commit two sins. You fasted without a dispensation. You broke your fast without a dispensation, and you got drunk. But if you did get a dispensation, you're only committing one sin by getting drunk. Just like if you put away your spouse without a dispensation, without permission from the bishop, without proving guilt, that's adultery. And if you go marry another, that's two adulteries. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. The Pharisees had virtually proposed two questions to Christ, which is why I say, okay, the first was whether it is lawful for any cause to divorce a wife. That's question number one. What can you divorce your wife for? And the answer is if she's guilty of fornication and, so if she commits adultery on you, that's one excuse. That's one exception that you can put away your spouse, separation with the bond remaining. The second is whether a wife was put away by a bill of divorce, the marriage was dissolved. Okay, so there's two questions. Yes. Can I separate? And does the marriage avincula, that means the bond, is it broken after with a bill of divorce? Okay. So the answer to both questions is it's adultery if you do either. All right. Now, the reason as people know, when you read the Bible, God doesn't waste time, waste words. He says everything with as much economy of words as needed. It's so just like Cornelius a Lapide here points out in this part right here. He says, the saying is true. I labor to be brief. I become obscure. So this is why Matthew 19:9 gets mixed up a lot, because he doesn't make it super idiot proof. He answers two questions with one answer. It's adultery either way you do it. Let's scroll down a little bit. I think are we basically done with that? Yeah, then he goes on and on. So I'm going to keep all this in the show notes so you can see it. You can listen to me, whatever, but I'm saying that we have Cornelius a Lapide and Father Nix agreeing with me. This is why I'm pointing this out. If you think I'm just a knucklehead nobody, you could listen to the two voices I mentioned, because they are the ones who are basically reintroducing this to the new generation here, because it's been gone since the Beatles, like I said, because of all we have to justify all these annulments. Let's look at that. Now we're going to go through Father Nix. Here we go. This will be exciting. Oh boy. Okay. Rocket.
Teach that even if a man should only divorce a chaste and innocent wife without marrying another, he commits adultery, both because, one, he breaks the law of marriage and violates the rights of his wife, which is a sort of adultery, for adultery means a vice directly opposed to matrimony.
Okay, so he's reading from effectively the same text as I just had. And so he just let me rewind that. Listen to what he said. Okay, listen.
Rights of his wife, which is a sort of adultery, for adultery means a vice directly opposed to matrimony.
Okay, so yes, the definition of adultery isn't extremely limited to that legal it's anything opposed to matrimony. Okay? That means abandonment is adultery. Okay?
Such as putting away a guiltless wife, and also because that line, he committeth adultery, that is, he makes her commit adultery, as Christ explained in Matthew chapter 5, verse 32. Now, this is really important. Therefore, he who puts away his wife, says Father Lapide, on account of fornication and marries another, does not indeed commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does so by marrying another. So, what Father Lapide is taking from Christ and the Church Fathers is the leaving the wife part. If she was unfaithful, you're not committing adultery by leaving her. You're committing adultery by marrying another. Now, we just heard it's a little bit different if your spouse, this goes either way, man or
I
woman.
don't quite understand
If
what
your
he said
spouse was
there.
innocent, you just want to leave, then you do commit adultery just by leaving. But
Yeah, see, there he goes. You do commit adultery just by leaving.
if there was unfaithfulness, this explains this. The one exception we heard in Matthew 19:9. Again, let me read you Father Lapide. Therefore, he who puts away his wife on account of fornication, and this would be the other direction to women and men.
Mhm.
Therefore, he who puts away his wife on account of fornication and marries another does not commit adultery by divorcing the adulteress, but does commit adultery by marrying another. I say too, Christ here concedes divorce to a man on account of the fornication of his wife, that is in reference to the bed, but not the dissolution of the marriage, such that he would be allowed to marry another. Christ therefore replies to both questions, and as it seems, by means of two propositions. One, whosoever shall put away his wife except for fornication commits adultery. And two, whosoever shall marry another commits adultery. For together with the bill of divorce, he abolishes polygamy, or having more than one wife at once, which had hitherto been allowed. The same thing is proved too by what proceeds when Christ proved absolutely from the very nature and original institution of matrimony, which fornication does not annul, that matrimony is altogether indissoluble. Let me read that again. The same thing is proved too by what precedes when Christ proved absolutely from the very nature and original institution of matrimony, which fornication does not annul, that matrimony is altogether indissoluble.
Right. Fornication does not annul. That's right. That's what he just said. Okay, good. Hello. So porneia, fornication, immorality, whatever you want to call it, does not annul the marriage, or is not a sign. You can't divorce because of that.
And then St. Jerome, St. John Chrysostom, and St. Bede, and St. Innocent, and Pope Innocent, St. Augustine, and Pope Innocent I severely reproach certain bishops of their time for conceding with Tertullian second marriages to wives on account of the adultery of their husband, saying that it is lawful for the innocent spouse to put away an adulterous partner and to marry another. So again, that was a list of saints that are very much against that opinion. Why are they against that opinion? Because that's exactly what Christ stood up to against the
I may have missed that part, but
Pharisees
whatever.
and all of their
Like I
silly
said,
loopholes.
this whole video is long, and this is kind of the main thing he was getting at, which is what he said, which is that I'm repeating this over just to try to get it straight. Putting away your spouse, if your spouse is innocent, is adultery. That's it. And we're going to find out more about who decides who decides if a spouse is innocent or not.
On marriage. So Christ is very serious about the indissolubility of marriage. And this is why, even though there are some exceptions, the magisterium, guided by the Holy Ghost, has allowed for the next 1,000 years of Christianity. This is why I would just summarize this, and I do have this in the show notes.
Okay, so this is Father Dave Nix summarizing what he just said. Let's listen.
Christ asserted to the apostles who would spread Catholic marriage, and also to the Pharisees looking for loopholes on remarriage, that in certain circumstances, a married person could carefully discern departure from one spouse when the other was provably guilty of unfaithfulness.
Okay. So he just said you can put away your spouse if here, let me rewind it. He said a mouthful there. We got to get this straight. Here we go.
Circumstances, a married person could carefully discern departure from one spouse when the other was provably guilty of unfaithfulness.
Okay. You can put away your spouse when the other is provably guilty of unfaithfulness. So we have to prove the other spouse guilty, okay? That requires a court. That requires due process. We got to find out how we're going to prove this, okay? Protestants can't do it because they ain't got a courtroom. Catholics do. Let's see what Father Dave Nix says.
And the early church added physical and psychological safety or salvation.
Right. So the early church added physical or psychological safety. So what happened at Council of Trent and all that? They said, and that's what canon law says now too. It's not just adultery you can separate for, but if things become to such a point where I gotta change my microphone. If things become to such a point that they can't live together, all right, then you can separate, but only by the bishop, only by ecclesiastical judgment. Otherwise, you can just follow your heart and walk right out of your bed and board because it's how you feel inside. You cannot judge your own case. It's anathema. It's adultery to divorce without the bishop's permission. That's the takeaway here. That's why you can't take your divorce to heaven unless the bishop held court first and determined you were the innocent spouse and your spouse was guilty. Hold on.
Salvation of this. Then you may discern departure from your spouse, but you still can't remarry.
Okay, so then this is where this is going on too long. Sorry. Listen, then he says you can discern departure from your spouse, but you cannot remarry. Bro, you can't. I don't mean to call you bro. Father Nix, you cannot discern departure on your own. You can't do that. This is what I go round and round with Father Dave Nix about. Actually, I don't even go round and round. It's all a one-way thing. I hit the ball to him and he doesn't hit back.
But then the reason I would encourage you to read the book Primal Loss.
Okay, here we go. So Primal Loss, Leila Miller. So he goes right into that. So Father Nix and Leila Miller, their problem is they talk about how you need the bishop's permission to divorce and all that, but effectively allow it to go on. And I'm gonna go into what it says in the back of Primal Laws here in a minute. Let's finish this off. Hang on.
By Leila Miller shows that even if you have a reason to take off, the kids are really going to suffer.
Okay, yes. Even if you have a reason to take off, you can't take off without the bishop's permission because it violates natural law, and that's why the kids suffer. I'm interrupting too much.
If you do. Everyone wants to go to the most extreme case of, battered wives, women who are beat up and stuff. Yeah, the church has always allowed people, one of the spouses who's in a psychological or physical situation that's dangerous, to take off for a time or even more than a time.
No, you can take off for 6 months total because after 6 months, you must initiate a separation decree. That is what he doesn't get right. It's Canon 1152.2, I think. Right there, it says within 6 months, if you're the innocent spouse and you, quote, take off, you've got to head back to town and initiate the separation decree. You've got to get court started because marriage is public. Protestants don't have that. And Father Nix here is advocating Protestantism on separation.
But one of the things that Leila Miller really helped me see is even when we're looking at cases when a modern tribunal, which is sort of the annulment arm, well, it does more than that, but it's become the annulment arm of the chancery, which is the central nervous system of a diocese. Even in the cases when they will hand out a declaration of nullity, retroactively declaring that putative bond to be null, children suffer. And if you read that book, Primal Loss by Leila Miller, you will see the adult survivors' descriptions of what it was like growing up with divorced families, numerous families all around them, and how that affected their adult lives. So even though we looked at a couple times when one can leave because one can leave the bed, but never the bond.
One can't, I'm saying it too much. You can't leave the bed without bishop's permission for more than 6 months, or it's public abandonment, aka adultery.
What we really also have to consider is the great destruction that divorce or separation, annulment, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it, leaves the children in.
Exactly, because separation, physical separation, violates natural law, which is why you can't do it unless there is a justifying reason. But because what God has joined, let not man put asunder. So that means you have to go to the bishop if you're going to put it asunder, the contract, and live separately with the bond remaining.
So even though we heard a couple exceptions, the main goal is only marry someone that you are sure you're going to be able to live a life with.
So that's kind of he makes a good point there. That's kind of a, how are we going to deal with this? Because marriage is lawless, and the bishop doesn't care about any. He ignores all this process. You get an annulment from, if you can fog a mirror, you can get the annulment, and the state can't even define the rights and duties of marriage. So marriage is Wild West to the max. Okay. Uh, so how do you do it? He says you marry the correct spouse. You up front, you want to marry somebody that understands that if they separate without the bishop's permission, it's grave sin. It's a mortal sin. They're not going to heaven. You got to get that up front so everybody knows that, and you marry a Catholic that is interested in getting to heaven and will do anything to get there. Now you're dealing with somebody that can, but you got to define marriage first before you get into it, and that's why you got to get this straight. Let's see what else he says.
And raise children with.
All right.
Please say an Our Father.
Good. That's it. All right. Cool. Let's cruise to what do we got here? Oh, here. Let's look at a little Leila Miller stuff real quick. Okay. This is the book, her PDF. What's it called? Primal Loss. Okay. So she says a lot of good stuff, but she effectively enables no fault divorce because she doesn't explain that it is always a mortal sin to separate without the bishop's permission. And even if the bishop doesn't want to hear your case, you have to continue to try to get it. You must pursue public due process. Here's what it says. Here's what she says. Divorce and separation are two different things. Let's define our terms. Divorce means to separate. Okay. We have two kinds of divorce. There's mensa et thoro. That means that's obviously from bed and board. So you can separate from living together, and you can separate the bond, like I'm not married anymore. Okay, that's called avincula matrimony. So there's two kinds of divorce. So she's talking about separation with the bond remaining. So okay, divorce is an attempt to break the marriage bond. Yeah, I guess you could say that, but not for to avincula, which we have seen. The first point is impossible with baptized Christians. That's right. It's you're divorced. You're married till death. That's it. Every marriage lasts till death. But separation is simply that, a physical separation of spouses. Yeah, but when the Catechism speaks of how divorce is a grave sin and violates natural law, that is the natural law that it's violating, the separation. You got to live together. Cutting off conjugal living and physically residing in separate homes. This is all Leila Miller's how-to advice here, or explanation of what Catholics can do. And I'm telling you, it's inadequate because it effectively communicates you can divorce on your own authority. This is her book. Cutting off conjugal living and physically residing in separate homes may sometimes be necessary, or either temporarily or permanently. Okay, that's true, but only by bishop's permission, which she doesn't say. The separation of spouses while maintaining the marriage bond can be legitimate in certain cases provided by canon law. Okay, yeah. Let's get a little bit down and figure out what that means, or which canon law, specifically 1153. Okay, so 1153, she doesn't, like I said, she doesn't mention the 6 month from 1152. Leila Miller is saying 1153, this is what you need to do if you want to be a good Catholic and separate. If either spouse's grave mental or physical danger to the other spouse or to offspring or otherwise renders common life too difficult, I have this memorized, sorry, that spouse gives the other legitimate cause for leaving. So if your spouse is giving you a massive hard time, you have legitimate cause to leaving, either by decree of the local ordinary, oh, so I can ask the bishop, or by my own authority if there's danger and delay. Yeah, I'm feeling kind of dangerous. I'm going to leave on my own authority. Boom. No fault divorce. Here we come. I've decided. Wrong. You can't do that because it must be proven in court, in separation court. In all cases, when the cause for separation ceases, the conjugal living must be restored. Okay. When the cause of separation ceases, who the heck decides what the cause of separation is? The answer is the bishop does. And until he decides, you don't get to stay separated. You have got to get the bishop on the case, and you have to continue to try to do that. They're falling all over themselves to try to get you to get the annulment, but they're freaking out when you say, I want a separation decree, but you got to try that. You have to. Okay, in all cases, okay, conjugal blah, blah, blah. All right. Okay. While I'm here, I'll just say this. Civil divorce may be tolerated under certain circumstances. Newsflash to Leila Miller. There are no circumstances in the USA today where civil divorce can be tolerated. None. It doesn't exist because it's never the only possible way. Just like it says, CC 2383, if civil divorce remains the only possible way of a certain, like, blah, 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 it can be tolerated, does not constitute a mortal offense. There is legal separation available. And then the 7 states where it's not, they have effectively the same thing under a different name. You can get a legal separation in all 50 states. You never need to divorce. So it's a grave offense every time, because divine law says these kids have to go to the innocent spouse, and no civil court will determine that. The bishop has to. All right. It goes on and on, but so Leila Miller doesn't nail this down enough, and it effectively, like I say, it basically permits no fault divorce right there, because she's not saying you are in mortal. It's a grave sin if you do not obtain a separation decree via the bishop. That's what the church teaches, because otherwise you're separating what God has joined. So let's see. I think I got one. We'll go through this little tab here, and I think we'll wrap it up. Okay, so this is just some more annulment stuff. I think I already went through here that when there's a question of alleged nullity of marriage, private authority is not recognized. All right, so this is all the stuff that talks about why Leila Miller needs to, and Father Dave Nix for that matter too. They're just glossing over all this permission to divorce stuff, and it's the key thing. Otherwise, like I say, marriage doesn't mean jack, and that's why it's in a free fall, because anyone can walk right out. We need Father Dave Nix and Leila Miller to explain they can't. I've tried to reach Father Nix many times. He gives me the hand. Okay, so okay, blah blah blah. Canon 12 of Council of Trent. If anyone says that matrimonial causes do not belong to the bishop, let him be anathema. Okay, separation is a matrimonial cause. That's why it's anathema to say, I can separate on my own authority. No, you can't. You can run out the door if you're in grave danger, but you got to, within 6 months, go take it to the ecclesiastical judge. It's Canon 1152-3, I think. Okay, so now this is kind of cool. This is from Pius IX in 1857. I don't want to try to say this word. Acerbiscimus vobiscum. Okay, so it is heresy. This is a condemned error of the heretics that you can divorce on your own authority. Let's look what he says. The sacrament can never be separated from the conjugal agreement. That's exactly what Leo XIII says in our Canon 23. You can't do it. And that's what your bishop does right now. And that's that's what Father Nix and Leila Miller more or less are allowing, because they're saying you can take your conjugal agreement to the state on your own authority, because your bishop doesn't want to help you out or whatever. You can't do it. Sorry. And that it pertains absolutely to the power of the church to discern those things which can pertain in any way to the same matrimony. It absolutely the power of the church. That's true, and it's in the new code of canon law too. It's only the church that can separate spouses. What else we got? Holy Office saying, yeah, Holy Office basically saying the same thing. Ought not to be regulated by the will of the civil rulers. You can't do it. Third Council of Baltimore, everyone's heard this one by now. I was amazed when I first heard it. We command all baptized married persons that they must not go to the civil courts to obtain separation from bed and board without previously receiving permission of the ecclesiastical authority. Anyone should attempt this, they incur the guilt of grave sin and be punished by the bishop. That is still in force today. Canon 6, if you read it, it continues with Third Council of Baltimore. It does not scorched earth. It just gets rid of the 1917 code, but not this. I've talked to Ed Peters about that anytime. He doesn't want to talk about it. Anyway, so this is this is divine law. This will never change. You can't change this. Not going to happen. Okay. The United States had many laws from in the 20th century. They each diocese had its own little what's the word when they all get together? I can't remember right now. Synod. And the synods would basically reiterate the same stuff. The ones from Providence is pretty cool. So in 1952, the one from Providence, hang on, I can fix this, says, under pain of mortal sin, Catholics may not approach the civil courts to obtain a civil separation, divorce, or annulment unless our explicit permission has been given them to do so. That's still in effect today. It's just ignored. We can't redefine marriage. I know we want to, but we can't. Portland, Oregon, same thing. Husbands and wives who disregard the divine and ecclesiastical law to live apart are to be admonished to resume the life in common. Should they refuse, they should be denounced to the ordinary. Then you lose the sacraments. If you say, hey, I'm taking my separation on the road, I don't need no stinking bishop, you're anathema. You can't, that's canon 915 right there. Because various serious prohibition of church law, as well as because the considerable scandal involved, the faithful shall be informed that no suit for civil divorce may be open unless permission of the ordinary will have been previously obtained. What do you think, Father Dave Nix? You have to do it's okay. All marriage cases are to be referred to the chancery of the perfect, blah, blah, blah. And this kind of goes on and on. I'll put this in the show notes, and I'm also going to, let's get rid of this. As I said, the difference between me and everybody else on YouTube, especially the Catholic commentator types, I answer every objection. I answer every question. I'll argue with you for 2 weeks if you want. That's my main difference, because I know I'm right, so I'm not afraid to put it out there and have you try to prove me wrong. It's been a lot of work, but that's how I learned this stuff. I think we're going to wrap it up. I don't know what else to say. Peace out.